have introduced a emergency earned income tax credit bill that would provide roughly 3/4 of the working population in the U.S. with checks ranging from $1,000 up to $6,000 a month. If this legislation passes the House and Senate, people would be getting these checks about 3 weeks after this legislation would be signed into law, and they would keep receiving those checks until the end of the year. So this particular legislation was introduced by Representatives Ro Khanna of California and Tim Ryan, who was formerly running for president. He's a representative of Ohio. It would apply to individuals who made less than $65,000 a year in 2019, which is around 3/4 of the workforce, and would cover roughly, I believe, the number is somewhere around 200 million of the U.S. population would get these benefits. And obviously, I totally agree with this strategy. We should be the government. We, the people, the government, should be looking at policies and measures that will help the working people and the most vulnerable and marginalized groups when the economy just keeps getting further hammered and wrecked by the coronavirus pandemic. We have the travel ban to Europe. A lot of schools are being closed. We don't have paid sick leave. We don't have universal health care. So people, if they are sick, there's no tests available. And if they are able to get tested, if they don't have insurance or they're underinsured, they can end up paying thousands of dollars out of pocket. So this is, and people are having to miss work if their kids are out of school, or if they get sick, they're having to go to work when they're sick. This would really help stem a lot of the suffering that has already been caused by the coronavirus. I just saw that a local paper, the Strangers, a Seattle paper, has had to temporarily lay off some workers. So saw on Twitter there's been some layoffs. I forget in what sector or field, but yeah, there's it's already hugely negatively impacting the economy. And again, it's going to be the working people and the most vulnerable and marginalized groups, especially elderly people, just folks with compromised immune systems, homeless folks who are already living in really extreme and harsh environments, who are going to be disproportionately negatively impacted. But again, even if you're a well healthy functioning individual at this point, you obviously don't want to get this virus, because if you do come in contact with those more vulnerable populations, it could spread to them, leading to more death and suffering. And I've heard the figures that it's estimated that potentially up to 100 million people, 100 million, so almost a third of the U.S. population, could contract coronavirus, and it has at least a 1% death rate. And if that's the case, that's a million people dead due to the coronavirus. So these measures are hugely important. And again, it's very telling. The right and to a certain degree, corporate Democrats are okay with corporate socialism, like Trump's 1.5 trillion dollars could have canceled basically all student loan debt in the U.S. $1 trillion bailout of Wall Street, when that money could have obviously done so much good. Like I said, canceling student loan debt, free college, insulin, free pre-K, emergency medical leave, environmental stuff, all of these things, corona testing kits, whatever it is, it would have been ending homelessness. The list goes on. Expanding Social Security, Medicare, whatever. The list goes on and on. So they're okay with propping up Wall Street, because that's the donor class. That's who supports the Republican Party, as well as to a huge extent the Democratic Party, and obviously the corporatist wing of that, which is in power currently. So kudos to Ro Khanna and Representative Tim Ryan for introducing this emergency earned income tax credit bill. And again, the earned income tax credit is something that lower income families receive each year at tax time. It's seen as actually a very popular program because people pay into it, they're working, and then they get this reward back. So it's hugely popular. Doesn't have the same stigma to it that a lot of other social safety net programs have around it. So it's hugely popular. So I think it makes a lot of sense to provide some relief, some aid through a emergency earned income tax credit bill. Hopefully it passes the House. I don't see why it wouldn't, given that it's a democratically controlled House. But then again, you have the more corporate Democrats in there who aren't, really there to work for the working people, but just the huge wealthy donors that support them. So we'll see if it passes. If I had to guess, I would say I think it does. But then the big question is obviously what happens when it gets to the Senate, which is controlled by Republicans. So it's a step in the right direction. And as Representative Ryan pointed out when introducing this legislation, 40%, almost half of the U.S. cannot afford a $400 emergency expense. And this coronavirus, you're supposed to supposedly, if you think you have it or you might have it, quarantine yourself for 14 days. That's 14 days not at work, especially if you're in a field where you're not able to, work from home, work remotely from a computer. If you're part of the, service industry or the so-called gig economy, or if you're in the trades or any of these if you work at a school, you can't exactly take that type of work home with you. So we need to be finding ways to help, people financially, excuse me, until this pandemic gets under control. So hope it passes. Really hope it does. It's definitely a step in the right direction, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this emergency earned income tax credit bill that Representative Khanna and Ryan introduced earlier today. Peace. Much love.